So introduce yourself.
Well, my name's Glenn Ditman, and I'm the author of this book, Images of America, which is coming out August 26th to the Riverbank Museum and to surrounding stores in the area, such as Barnes & Noble.
So what possessed you to write a book about the history of Riverbank?
Well, the thing of it is, there's several things that actually did make me interested in doing that. The first one was that I'd seen books done in other areas, such as the coast side, and I've seen a lot of books done in the surrounding areas, such as Turlock, Modesto. Riverbank didn't have one yet. So it just kind of entered my mind to ask Arcadia on their website, well, is anyone writing one right now? They said that, well, someone has started one, but they kind of had to abandon it. So I decided to pick it up. The other reason that I wanted to do this is because my family, two of the great-grandfathers on my father's side were prominent businessmen in the area. One of them built the Ditman Apartments over on 3rd and Topeka. The other one had a photo studio kind of on the western side of town. Well, originally I think it was downtown, but then it moved over into the western area. But, and then kind of coming in here, I noticed some of the history was a little bit mixed up, So I wanted to kind of correct some of the misconceptions that I had seen in the past.
So did you use any of the work from the original book that was being wrote?
Not really, because as I mentioned, I kind of went through those and kind of extracted a little bit, but I put it into my own words. The other thing, too, is a lot of the stuff was erroneous. For instance, one of the books mentioned that Bernieville and Riverbank are both the same town. That's not true. Bernieville was its own separate entity, and back in the late 1800s. And then when Bernieville went out, it actually was abandoned at one point. The only thing that was left there was a ferry and a few surrounding buildings that went with that business. Then when the railroad came through, Riverbank was on the other side of the river where they put the depot stop, decided to build the roundhouse and all the buildings that went with that. So Riverbank always has been its own separate town. And then I think it took Bernieville, what was left of it, under its wing in the 1920s.
So what is your feelings after writing the book? Are you happy with it? Are you feel fulfilled that you've accomplished something for the town of Riverbank?
I definitely feel fulfilled in it, in that I've always wanted to be an author. And I think, too, that it's going to help the town in the aspect of the town's going to discover more about itself. I'm hoping that this will bring people into the town to discuss more of its history, to find out more, contribute more. Because when I started the book, it was kind of in spurts and stops, bits and pieces coming in from here and there. The funny thing is, when I wanted to find out about a particular aspect of the history, that week somebody seemed to come in and tell me, oh, I want to tell you about so-and-so, or about the police or the fire department, whatever it might be. So it was kind of interesting how things kind of interplayed and meshed together with people contributing facts.
So what was the weakest part of the history to get a hold of information from Riverbank?
I would say one of the areas that I could mention would be the police department. There's a lot of scattered history on that. In fact, when I initially started, there was only one article on one police officer who was the only one who actually passed away in the line of duty. Then I'd also heard a little bit about Judge Staley being in the city hall over here next door to the museum, but that was pretty much it. And then as we kind of dug a little bit more, we found some articles in some old newspapers, heard people who came in and told us different things about some of the different constables that were in the area. But even now, that history is kind of sketchy. There are also other aspects to different businesses which we don't really know a whole lot about. We're just beginning to find out some of the history. Another area that I can mention as well is the history of the Hispanic population in the town. Now, fortunately, another docent is planning to do a book on that aspect. There were originally about 8 to 10 Hispanic families in the area. So my book, it's a little bit sketchy in that there's a couple of pictures here and there because I didn't know anything, and I didn't know any of the families in the area.
So what possessed this other person to write a book about the Hispanic part of Riverbank?
Number one, he's a city council member. Number two, he's married to one of the original Hispanic families in the area.
Mm.
That person, his wife, is related to Oscar Acosta, who wrote about his experience in the area in the 1940s.
Mm. So what is your feelings on another book about Riverbank coming out?
I'm glad that someone else is interested in writing about Riverbank, because people come through our town and they don't know anything about our history. In fact, one of the jokes that we have here at the museum is that when you're out in the public and you mention the fact that Riverbank has a museum, they're like, oh, Riverbank has a museum? Gosh, I didn't know that. So they don't even know that there's a place here recording the history of the town. They don't even know anything about that history. I know I myself, I passed by the Zarilla Mansion many times traveling through. I had no idea that it had a direct connection to the city. Who owned it? Nothing. And that's pretty much where the public too is when they drive through. There's no signs that say, this is the Zarilla Mansion, this is where the museum is. There's nothing of that nature anywhere along the highway.
So basically you're trying to link all the small pictures together to one big picture of the city history.
Well, that's pretty much what you do as a historian anyways. You know, you try and link the history together into a concise history to make it interesting to people, to give it a flow, something that will attract them in and make them want to learn more about the town.
So any last words on anyone who would want to write a book about history of Riverbank or something else?
I would encourage anybody else to do it. I believe that they will learn fascinating things about the town in the same way that I did. You know, I did not realize that there were haunted houses in Riverbank. Houses. We knew of one, and only one, over on Riverside. Now we know of 5. Interesting stories such as the unsolved mystery at the bank with the bank president who absconded funds and escaped, and nobody knows where he went to.
Well, thank you.
Sure.